Thank you, Madam Chair. And before I begin, I want to take a moment to acknowledge the passing of our former Congressman Lincoln Diaz. Lincoln served on the Rules Committee, and while we didn't always agree, I respected him because he believed in the power of good governance and fair debate. He understood that our role as lawmakers is about working for the American people, and it was an honor to serve with him, and my prayers go out to his family at this difficult time.
Thank you, Mr. McGovern. I appreciate your doing that.
And now on to the business of the day. Madam Chair, last week, Republicans passed a budget resolution that paves the way for their betrayal of the middle class, stealing from hardworking people so they can give tax breaks to billionaires. This week, they are doubling down, dismantling protections that keep people healthy and safe. Even worse, while Republicans complain about home appliances and car tires, issues that don't even crack the top 100 concerns that I hear from my constituents, the GOP is quietly pushing Trump's broader agenda of destruction. Now, just look at what is happening. DOGE sacked hundreds of workers who keep our nuclear weapons safe, then scrambled to rehire those workers when they realized they screwed up. They fired critical staff from VA hospitals, including disabled veterans. They decimated the NIH office responsible for groundbreaking research on Alzheimer's and dementia. They dismantled Ebola prevention teams along with other critical disease surveillance programs, despite there being a nationwide measles outbreak for the first time in decades. They cut experts working on the bird flu response, you know, the thing that is making eggs so expensive and causing shortages. And now they are working to try to hire them back. I mean, talk about efficiency. We have wildfires raging in South Carolina as Elon guts FEMA, Trump golfs in Florida, and J.D. Vance hits the slopes in Vermont. Can you imagine if Joe Biden went golfing during the California fires? You guys would have a meltdown. But when it's the dear leader, Donald Trump, suddenly it's all fine. And I'd be remiss if I didn't mention the disgraceful spectacle in the Oval Office last week. You know, I just got home from meeting with my constituents in a town hall, and I called Coffee with Your Congressman in Leominster, Massachusetts. It isn't exactly a Democratic stronghold. Normally I get about 30 or 40 people show up. This week we had well over 300 people show up. And the people who showed up were overwhelmingly disgusted, embarrassed, and angry over what transpired at the White House on Friday between President Trump and President Zelensky. I watched the entire video. Not once did Trump or J.D. Vance say a single negative thing about Vladimir Putin. Not a single bad word for the bloodthirsty dictator who invaded Ukraine. Not a single word of support for our allies in Ukraine who are just fighting against Russian aggression. And it seems like people need a little bit of a history lesson. You know, when the Soviet Union fell in the late 90s, Ukraine was left with the world's third largest stockpile of nuclear weapons on the planet. In turn, they signed an agreement with us, the United Kingdom, and Russia, in which they agreed to give up all those weapons if we, the other three signers, agreed to uphold Ukraine's sovereignty and independence. So Ukraine and Russia already had a peace agreement. Russia violated it. Russia invaded Ukraine, and the fastest way for this war to end is for Russia to stop the invasion. We, the United States, we also signed that agreement. We promised to help protect Ukraine's freedom, and Trump is not living up to that agreement. So long as Trump backtracks, no one is going to trust our word, and that's exactly what Russia wants. Just after the meeting, the Kremlin spokesman said, and I quote, "The new U.S. administration is rapidly changing all foreign policy configurations. This largely coincides with our vision," end quote. Do you know what that sounds like? It sounds like our national leaders are in the pockets of the Russian government. It sounds like Trump and Vance are playing right into Putin's hands, undermining our allies and aligning with our adversaries. In fact, just for the sake of argument, let's say we had a president who was doing Putin's bidding, who was secretly trying to undermine the United States, and that president wanted to destroy us from within. You know what they would probably do? Well, they would dismantle our professional civil service. They would withdraw from the world and threaten to leave NATO. They would shut down foreign aid. They would turn their backs on our allies and embrace our adversaries. And they might weaken our ability to fight off Russian cyber operations against U.S. critical infrastructure. Do those things sound familiar? Because I think they do. And let's be clear, everything I have mentioned, dismantling regulations, destroying institutions, abandoning our global commitments, makes Americans less safe, not more. And let me make one more thing clear. Republicans own this. You control the House, you control the Senate, and you control the White House. We do not live in a dictatorship. You could stand up to this stuff, but you don't. You could provide oversight on the very real, very massive scandals happening right now, but you won't. You could pass real policies to bring down the cost of food, stop the egg shortage, help middle-class families, and protect this country, but you're not. Instead, you're stealing from the middle class to enrich billionaires, trying to overturn Biden-era rules no one has ever even heard of, and offering the Western world on a platter to dictators. So, well, we're not going to stand by while extremists dismantle our government and hurt everyday Americans. The Republican agenda comes at the expense of the people we were all elected to serve. Enough is enough, and I yield back my time.
Thank you, Mr. McGovern. Without objection, any prepared statements that our witnesses have